Yo, what's up, comrades? Hope everyone's doing great. We're here to talk about Unbreakable Sphere, but first we have to address a couple of Bond stories because we have 3 Bond stories related to this event since it's an anniversary event. And the first one is gonna be, I already wrote it down here, scrolling. Okay, so the first one is actually gonna be Siren, because Siren's Bond story takes place all the way back before Old Tales was broken up. Right, so we start off and we have Old Tales has just been established by Abe, who later becomes Grave, obviously, and she's struggling to manage all the egos, specifically like Cinderella, right? Because so as I was saying, Cinderella is vain. She talks about her beauty all the time. Hansel and Gretel are always bored and don't want to do it. And then Siren just babbles. That's a mystery what she's thinking because she's trying not to Kodama anybody. So there's a bunch of mock battles that Abe puts them all through, and we discover that there's an issue with Siren's Kodama ability. It's indiscriminate. So whenever she does something, it just affects like everybody. And so she's able to successfully freeze raptures, but she also accidentally paralyzes her entire team as well, turning this like quote unquote tactical success into a fiasco, right? So the aftermath of this failure for her to like be able to control her powers to the level she needs to so she can be effective in battle leads to some conversation with Red Shoes and Hansel and Gretel with her about how she could theoretically command Nikkes to portray humanity with her powers. And then they compare her ability to her Kodama to corruption, which is like the thing that most Nikkes fear the most, right? Because then you're working for the Raptures to destroy like your whole purpose for existence and stuff. They try to comfort her because, they're like, oh no, we trust you. We trust that you're not going to do that and stuff. But there's also, Siren notices that they look very uncomfortable with the fact that she can kind of like control them and whatnot. And then there's a comment about, how she can like steal people's free will, which makes her like very sad. And overwhelmed with this concept that like she could be evil, that there's like potential evil uses for her like Kodama, her gift, she flees. Right, and this is where she puts herself in like a self-imposed silence, right? Just babbling and whatnot. A bit later, Abe notices that Siren's gone, that she's withdrawn herself, and she calls her in for private testing. Here, they're able to develop like a bond, right? Because Abe is the one who originally warned Siren that her power could isolate her if misused, and Abe promises that she'll act as Siren's like safety net, promising her that she'll stop her if she ever goes too far. She'll make sure Siren never turns to like the dark side or whatever. And she encourages Siren to use her Kodama to command herself to be the nicest person she knows, effectively giving Siren permission to keep trying to be a hero despite all her fears. A bit later on, we hit up, Abe introduces Combat Simulation 2.0, which is this super hyper-realistic program and the squad is like doing stuff, they're killing things, whatever, and they start to become overwhelmed by a tyrant class rapture. And at some point, the Hansel and Gretel are captured by this thing. So Siren finally finds, like at this juncture, because of the high stress and everything, the solution to her tactical flaw. And this is she does this, and this is where she learns how to like whisper her commands, like Kodama commands, into a bubble, and then sending the bubble to like whisper it to the enemy so they're the only ones who hear it. And this way she can selectively target only certain enemies or only groups of enemies or whatnot. And this leaves her friends completely free. So using this ability, she's able to save the squad, and they're able to overcome the combat simulation, proving her immense worth. This thing is the issue though is that it takes a lot of mental and physical strain for her to like control all this stuff, make all this stuff happen. And so right at the end of the simulation, she passes out. A bit later on, she wakes up in a lab. She's surrounded by all her sisters, essentially, right? Like all the girls and mom, Abe. They have like, it's all very sweet, and everyone's like, oh, blah, 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 blah. And so she finally explains like her silence, why she's not been talking, all this stuff, and that she'd rather be mute forever than to ever hurt or frighten her friends. And they're all moved by how stupidly nice she is, which is like a character benefit of Siren, as Siren is the nicest Nikke, like the kindest, most like she's like the angel, she's like the Mother Teresa of the Nikke world. She is only pure like empathy and love for other people. Siren is so fucking good. Anyway, but everyone tells her they trust her, and they apologize for being kind of mean or whatever. And and then they all kind of realize that they can translate her like little babbles or like ooh ooh because because they're family and family. What is that thing from fucking that car show? Whatever, family. Anyway, and so they all end up dragging Abe, who's like a big curmudgeon as usual, out to a celebratory meal. And this kind of marks the moment when Old Tales is finally like a united force working together. And so that's super sweet. All right, next up we have Mori's story. So this goes back in time as well. So further ahead than Siren's story, obviously, but like I think it's supposed to be years before Unbreakable Sphere, which is the event, right? So we are going to a bar. We're going somewhere. I think it was a bar with all the counters, and we bump into this super drunk Nikke who's like, looks disheveled and it's like a complete mess. And Anise and Neon are like, maybe we should go somewhere else to do something. But Rappy points out that she has something to do with like the incubator or something like that. And then Mori starts ranting. Oh no, Mori starts ranting about needing an evaluator to save her from scrapping and all this stuff and being very hostile and calling us like jarhead and stuff. And that's when Rappy is like, oh, incubator and incubator squad. And it's like, oh, what's the incubator squad? Before we can get an answer on that, ACPU, specifically Pulley, rolls up and hauls her away. But we decide, you know what, we're here to save every Nikke humanly possible, so we're going to go help. So then we learn the reality of the incubator squad, which is Mori's squad before she joins Old Tale. Oh, we haven't gotten to the point yet, sorry. And Incubator Squad is a second chance unit. It acts kind of like it's less of a like second chance and more of like this is where the trash goes. So all the Nikkes that are deemed like useless and problematic, and the only way out of the Incubator Squad is an evaluation with the human commander, a role that is most do not waste their time on because it's a waste of their time. So Rappy and Anise warn us that failing an evaluation can often lead to the Nikke being scrapped, but defying the stigma, as we usually do, that we decide we're going to register as Mori's evaluator. And then when Mori finds out, she is like shocked, but very grateful because now she has a chance not to be scrapped. So we start working with her, and this evaluation hits, it kind of like gets stopped almost immediately because Mori she's subjected to a bunch of combat simulations, and she is absolutely terrible, like failures across the board. She has no special abilities, poor aim, zero tactical presence. The clerk, or like the person working with the incubator squad and all this stuff, talks about how the whole thing is like a crabs in the bucket mentality, and how other Nikkes are super jealous of her because she found an evaluator, and a lot of them don't have that. And instead of like trying to be like, oh, good job, baby girl, they like try to tear her down, right? So that's the crabs in the bucket thing. And so we consider just like passing her just to like, it's like so she can just, because we feel bad for her, and we're like, no, that will not help her because she'll go to the service and die anyway. So we're like, all right, cool. We're going to enlist Anise, Neon, and Rappy to help turn her life around. So the counters all take Mori under their wing. Rappy focuses on survival gear, like shovels, compasses, and shit. And then Anise works on vigilance, and Neon, of course, works on firepower. And the goal is not for us to help her get a passing grade, which is a D. We want her to actually be self-sufficient and find some use in life, so she doesn't need to rely on anybody else to stay alive. And so she begins to improve. We get her up to like a E ranking or whatever, and she starts to internalize like our beliefs and our belief that she actually has like intrinsic value in life. At some point, though, tragedy strikes because jealousy for a bunch of other Nikkes causes a surge in complaints, leading to the central government to abolish the evaluator system altogether. So instead of being able to continue to help her, the crabs in the bucket bring everybody down. So good job. So they want to make sure Mori stays trapped with the other crabs. They then drag her into a high-risk surface mission before she can even graduate. And so at that point, we have to say goodbye to Mori, and she's forced to leave. And she believes that she's failed and that she's destined for death. And we pray that anyone will be able to reach out to her on the surface and help her understand that her life is value and be able to internalize the things that we taught her. And that's the end. Which leads... It doesn't lead directly into Unbreakable Sphere, I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure it's supposed to take place. Oh, maybe it does. No, I don't think so. We'll get there. But I'm pretty sure this happens like slowly. I mean, this seems like it's supposed to take place like way beforehand, but it almost leads right into it, kind of like with Kilo's Bond story. So maybe I just misunderstood. But anyway, next up is Unbreakable Sphere. All right, time for Unbreakable Sphere. And so we start off with the prologue. So the prologue begins, the central government's finally ready to use the AA pillar to destroy the crystal region, and we're all ready to go. So we have Mana and Shifty, they're talking about it, coast is clear, no one's in the area, everything should be great. And then they launch the AA sphere, and then all of a sudden, like, what the fuck is that? And Gluttony pops up, that's right. Eats the shit out of the AA pillar, but also eats the shit out of Mori, Mihara, and Uni. Sexy, we're already upgraded to Sexy Mihara and Robot Uni. And so then we take Mori's perspective at that point, and she's like, am I in the ocean? Am I drowning? What is happening? I wish someone would save me. I don't want to die. And then she hears a voice that's like, I will save you. And a mysterious hand like grabs her and pulls her out. When she awakens, she's in the beautiful bubble garden, which is like the big bubble sphere, the unbreakable sphere that Siren has produced, because she's been living in gluttony for like 70 fucking years, right? And so they have like a little fun conversation, and Mihara and Uni are there, and Mihara's super grateful, but Uni, of course, is a little cunt about the whole situation because she doesn't trust anybody. And so Mihara is like looking around and very intrigued and all this stuff. And then she like gets really upset, and she's like, there's no way this is actually the ocean. And then they see like fish swimming around or something. And they're like, oh, there it is. We're underwater. Then Siren explains to them that they're actually trapped inside gluttony, right? That there's no way out, and that she needs like a month or so to like gain enough power to be able to push them back out. And that this whole thing is this bubble, that purple, all the bubble stuff is created by her Kododoma, right? But that grabbing them and creating the giant sphere, because before she was just kind of like taking care of herself, has taken a lot of her energy. And so, you know, as I said, it's taken about a month before she can get them back to the surface. And then Mori freaks out because she thinks about how she's on like this time-sensitive mission. She was sent by Jien to spy on Mihara and Uni, and she needs to report back within like 2 months. And that's how, so Mihara and Uni were over here doing stuff, as we see from the end of, what was it? Yeah, we've already seen this, that they were like out here doing stuff, searching for gluttony and whatnot. So they found him, but then they got eaten by him. And then Mori was like secretly watching them, so they all got swallowed together. Okay. So Mori starts freaking out at this point. Mihara is able to like de-escalate the whole situation and talks about how like, hey, we can push you out of the bubble, but you'll probably die, and that's not something you necessarily want to do. So in the meantime, to pass the time, Siren asks her guests to scavenge for a bunch of stuff. They find like building ship, the AA pillar. We also meet like Siren's little robot bubble people, because the bubbles are just like nanomachines. And then we can play like a fun real-time adventure game. Not real-time adventure game, real-time strategy game with them. Is it strategy? Well, I'm trying to remember. It's been a while since I played this game. No, I don't think it was. It's more like a role-playing game. Anyway, we can play games. That's like the mini game, right? Her little bubble robots or whatever. So despite everyone working together, trying to gather things, trying to figure stuff out, Mori remains very hostile, very distant, and she's extremely haunted by the idea that if she doesn't help Jien, then she's going to die, right? But also that she's stuck here with the people she's supposed to be spying on, and she's worried that they're going to like find out as well. So Mori's got a lot of like issues that she's dealing with at this current time. A day goes by, Siren provides everybody with nice soft bubble beds and everything else. And again, Mihara's like delighted by the whole situation. Uni's a bit suspicious of Mori. And Mihara privately reflects on the mystery of Siren herself and the massive like gluttony, the massive mouth that ate them and brought them here. Seeking some isolation, Mori rejects the bubble beds and just digs a fucking hole in the dirt. And Siren has this delightful look on her face while she's looking down on her in this shot. And it's like, what? And she's like, Mori, just come lay down in the bed. Like, what are you doing? And then they have like a nice little moment there. A bit later, Siren brings Mori to her workshop beneath the garden's central tree, and it's filled with shimmering bubbles and all that stuff. She reveals that she's created bubbles as company, right, to stave off like the loneliness and being trapped here alone for decades, right? And so we see old tales, we see Levy, and all that kind of the bubbles we saw in the previous story adventure, right? And Mori points out that they kind of look like frozen tears on some level. And Siren offers her like a hug bubble to help her sleep. And Mori's still like, no, leave me alone. Every time someone gives me something, it's betrayal. My entire life has been betrayal. And so your kindness is a trap. And then she storms off, and Siren's like, oh. We then hop over to Mihara, who discovers that the central tree is just liquid metal, right? And it filters energy to maintain the garden. And so she uses her powers to kind of sync with the tree. And Mihara senses a presence watching them from the outside. And a massive entity that Siren warns they cannot afford to provoke, which is gluttony, right? It's just the core or whatever. Siren confesses that she's been alone in this bubble. Oh, this is where she talks about 70 years, and she views their arrival as a gift rather than a burden. And then Mihara is like moved by this revelation that Siren's been here for so long, and she promises she says she wants to listen to Siren's like full story. 2 weeks have gone by. We jump ahead to 2 weeks, and Mori's like starting to thaw because Siren is the best, and she grows used to the routine, the communal meals, the scavenging with wardress, the nightly visits to her like hole in the ground. But at some point, the pieces shatter when the group spots like digestive fluids, like the silver, and a swarm of raptures just hanging out outside the bubble. Siren is forced to reveal the truth, that they aren't underwater, that they're inside the throat of gluttony. Okay, so this is where they find out about that. So before, the whole time she was lying about water, now she's doing this. All right, Mori like freaks the fuck out, tries to run away. She accidentally drops and activates a rapture call signal given to her by Jian, and the signal draws raptures that tear a hole in the bubble, allowing digestive fluid to leak in even more. Signal also triggers a rapture hybrid side of Uni, because remember Uni's like half rapture at this point, who enters a trance and begins to strangle Mihara. Siren intervenes using her voice to remind Uni of her love for Mihara, use the Kododoma, and successfully is able to help her snap out of like her bloodlust to want to destroy Nikke's. And then Uni is like overwhelmed with guilt. Mori's overwhelmed with guilt, and Mori like flees, and Uni like sobs into Mihara's arms, right? So super sad. And finally, we get like the backstory, which we kind of got in the Bond story, but so Incubator. So in a flashback, we learn that Mori's past, right? She was created immediately. They were like, "Oh, you're a defective," she was a missileless model with no special powers. So she was bullied and sabotaged by her peers, and then she learned to survive by burrowing into the dirt to hide from raptures instead of being killed, right? At some point, she was framed for theft and sent to the incubator squads, right? So she was hanging out with a bunch of like mass-produced Nikke. So I don't know if she was supposed to be mass-produced Nikke, and she just like got better because it's like you're a failure, but you keep your own personality of being a failure. It's kind of weird. Anyway, and as we talked about a little bit before, the Bond story, the incubator squad is where you dump scrap Nikkes that are going to be like scrap. Mori then becomes like a pariah. Everyone around her gets like scrapped or is like failure, and then she gets like a reputation. And then she eventually had to start taking like dirty jobs for Jian just to like stay alive and not be scrap, leading her to believe that she is a bad luck charm who brings misery to all around her. Siren then finds her hiding in her burrow and contemplating like killing herself to stop like this cycle of misfortune and messing up and all this stuff. And then Mori screams at her for being like a strong Nikke that can never understand being spurned by the world. However, Siren then starts revealing some of her backstory, the shocking truth, that she was the one who caught Mori's hand and when she was drowning in the prologue, right, which I guess Mori didn't realize. And so Siren insists that Mori's life is a miracle and proposes that they celebrate today as her birthday, or the first time anyone has ever celebrated her existence at all. And this kind of starts turning things around for Mori because, again, Siren's the best. She's the most delightful. So for the first time in her life, Mori breaks down. She's crying. She's letting go of her like defensive walls she built up and all the malice and hatred and stuff. And Siren's like helping her out. She admits that she's extremely scared of being betrayed and being stabbed in the back, and that blinded her from Siren's like actual goodness and genuine goodness, because so many people, like the crabs in the bucket thing, right? So Siren explains that she refuses to let other friends go, and she thinks about Cinderella. She kind of references like the stuff with Cinderella, like turning her back on her and stuff. And then finally, Mori like accepts Siren's hands and comes out of her fucking hole, and then is like, "Thank you." And then they head back to everybody else. They then reconcile as Mori sincerely apologizes for the danger she caused, and Siren apologizes for hiding the truth about their location being in gluttony and whatnot. So then Siren explains that the bubble garden is a safe zone she built within the rapture gluttony because of her bubbles, and that while it's breakable, it cannot be assimilated by its digestive fluids as long as it's up. So due to the sudden surge of all the energy that's been siphoned from the swallowed AA pillar, Siren reveals that they can actually leave a week ahead of schedule because she's kind of torn it apart to gain her powers back. However, Mihara correctly suspects that Siren is hiding something, that the accelerated plan involves Siren risking her own life to stabilize the volatile pillar energy. And so in the days they have left together, the trio falls into a contemplative state, the trio being Mihara, Siren, and Mori. So they enjoy the quiet time in the garden. Mori visits Siren's workshop and discovers this is where she finds the bubbles of Cinderella, Hansel, Gretel, and Abe, along with Leviathan. She reveals that she's been separated them for decades at this point, 70 years, and dreams of rewriting their stories together. At that point, Mori begs Siren to escape with them and find her friends. And Siren is like, "No, I have to stay here. I have to manage this AA pillar and ensure that her new friends reach the surface safely. So then the day of departure arrives. Siren explains the escape plan. She will launch the trio through Gluttony's air hole inside protective bubbles. And then at that point, Mori realizes that the AA pillar has become a ticking time bomb because of the rapture signal Mori triggered earlier. So again, Mori has caused this problem, and Siren's willing to just take it and not blame her because Siren is the best. Siren then explains that if Gluttony assimilates the pillar's power, it could launch a cataclysmic attack on the surface, right? Because that's what it does. It takes things and absorbs things. And so Siren chooses to stay behind to destroy the pillar, which will sacrifice herself and act, and then, it's like, because I am a goddess of victory. It's like, that's the name of the game. I love when they do that. It's very powerful. And that she's going to protect the world by destroying this thing. And that she can die happy knowing that Mori, Mihara, and Uni will be witnesses to her normal end and that she was able to rewrite her story, right? So then Mihara, Uni, and Mori are everything goes successful up to that point. So they get washed up on shore. They're away from Gluttony and all that stuff. But then their joy of being saved and being back on the surface is replaced with grief as they realize Siren is gone. And the Gluttony begins to move. Mori desperately tries to dig back into the earth to save her friend to follow Gluttony. But eventually she collapses, crying and being sad and stuff. Back in the bubble with Siren, she's like, wow, it's really quiet now. I didn't realize how quiet it was here. And then she talks to her old friends, the bubble friends, and apologizes for not being able to wait for them any longer. And then she talks about how she can die in peace and stuff and that she'll be okay. She then prepares to face her end, but she's kind of content that she was able to make a difference and save people's lives. And then we get an epilogue to this is the end of part 1 of the story. And in that, we get Jian starts messaging Mori, demanding a report because she hasn't heard anything in a long time and she wants to know what's going on with Uni and stuff. But then the person who responds to Jian isn't Mori. It's Mihara. And because Siren warned her about what's going on. And clearly Wardress has adopted Mori at this point, so they're going to take care of her. Mihara is the queen, right? So she's not going to put up with no bullshit. And so she informs Jian that they need to have a very serious conversation, implying that they're going to come talk to her in Missless and kind of figure shit out. And that leads to part 2, which begins in the final moments before the gardens collapse. Siren reflects upon the decades of isolation. She recalls the cold, wet-hued void of Gluttony's throat and how she nearly gave up until she remembered a promise she gave to Cinderella, originally when she got swallowed, right? That she was going to rewrite their failed fairy tale into a happy ending. This resolve allowed her to build a bubble sanctuary and to send up bubble clones for years, hoping that someone would find them and rescue them, which Cinderella's on her way, right? And though she made new friends and they left, she is now filled with courage. She's not disappointed anymore, not sad in that she was never found or rescued, but that she's happy that she was able to make a difference and that she was able to be a goddess of victory for somebody and that someone will remember her and her sacrifice. Elsewhere, Mori awakens in a medical facility at Reclamation Site 1. She's safe, but she's freaking out about Siren, and then she's about to run back and try to dig a hole in the ground or something, but Mihara stops her, explaining the history of Gluttony. First, this is the Tyrant class that swallowed the ICBM missile and annihilated the launch site with the reflected energy, right? And that's part of the reason Siren wants to destroy the AA pillar, because it's even more powerful or has more energy than an ICBM missile from 100 years ago. And then Mihara argues with her about how Siren died so that Mori would have a chance at life, and that returning to kill herself would, just disgrace Siren's memory. Mori then breaks down again, pleading for help and offering her own life, possessions, and her dignity as payment. So Mihara finally relents, and Wardress agrees that they will work together to rescue Siren. They head over to MMR and meet up with Mana and Shifty, and they try to find a weakness to Gluttony. They learn that the central government has abandoned the mission to destroy Gluttony and to destroy the crystal region, because Gluttony is too dangerous to engage. However, Mana reveals a scrapped plan that they didn't use, and that was to infect Gluttony's core with E2 crystals, which is the crystals they were trying to destroy, which, since they act as a parasite, to sap all the energy from machines. And the plan is super risky, requires someone to enter the beast's mouth and plant the crystals in there. Mori is I'll do it. And the main obstacles remain. How do you lure the beast? How do you get Gluttony to come out of the ground and open its jaws long enough for someone to head in there and stab the thing with the crystals? So they think about how they can get it out, how they can summon it, how they can restrain it, and then Mihara is I have an idea. And so she demands Mori's phone, and this is where she contacts Jian, right? The most powerful, one of the most powerful and ruthless people on the planet. This is Jian, the shadow of Missless. Mihara realizes that to protect Uni, to protect Mori, and to take care of like her friends, she must stop being powerless and she must seek strength, even if she's getting it from the devil, who's Jian. So Mihara begins to a correspondence with Jian, and Uni is like freaking out about it because she knows that Mihara is going to make some sort of crazy sacrifice, right? Just like she always does, and that makes Uni very concerned because she doesn't want to lose her friend. And so with this next portion, Mihara and Jian go back and forth. And so in a deal, essentially, Mihara will take strength from Jian. Uni will not be forced to go through any more experiments. And the expiration date for Mori's life will be rescinded. And in return, Mihara will take on like all their sins, essentially, like Jesus Christ. And we find out that Mihara thinks about how Siren was telling her that she can sense Uni has two cores. She has a Nikke core and a Rapture core. And then, her and Mihara and Jian get into it about how Jian's goal is to hybridize Nikke so they can have two cores, right? Which make them so much more stronger, which is what makes Rappy so strong, right? Because she has two cores, or had two cores, until they merged. And then Jian agrees to do everything Mihara said if Mihara agrees to take a Rapture core and plant it into her own body, which is like a death sentence, but it will give her enough power to defeat Gluttony if she survives, and it will also guarantee the freedom of her friends. Meanwhile, there's a confrontation between Uni and Mori. And Uni is still like super pissed off about Mori like betraying them and causing all the problems and harming Siren and everything. And she's about to strangle Mori. But she sees Mori's tears and she hears her desperate plea to save Siren, who's like the one person who ever loved her. And then Uni recognizes her own reflection about her and Mihara and how she felt and everything. And so they both like hug it out and cry. And they're bonded by their shared terror of losing like the one person in the whole world that gives a shit about them at all. Back inside Gluttony, Siren's sanctuary is completely falling apart as she brings it closer and closer in to protect herself and the bubbles and the A pillar and stuff, and to quarantine off the A pillar. The Gluttony's core finally detects her as an existence, right? And so it starts like really assaulting her with like the silvery digestive fluids. And then her own body starts to break down into liquid metal from the strain of like using her powers to protect the A pillar. Despite all this, despite the agony, despite the blurring vision, despite everything, she clings on to the AA pillar, refusing to let the Gluttony take it, right? So back on the surface, the rescue operation begins. Mihara prepares to bait Gluttony, but first she must survive the activation of her deep unlock code. That's right, deep's back, motherfuckers. What the fuck is deep? Oh, we'll find out. Not here, though. It'll be like a couple months out. Anyway. So she got the Rapture core. It was given to Mana. Mana installed it. Mana asked a lot of questions, and Jian said, "Do you really want to know?" And Mana's like, "Nope, I don't actually." And then Mihara asked some questions, and Jian was like, "You really want to know?" And she's like, "Nope, I don't." So they get it inside there, and they talk about how like the Rapture core, part of the problem with the Rapture core is that it tries to consume the Nikke core, and then that's like causes problems before. But then, hey, we're going to do some experimentation. That's all Jian cares about. And so she gets the experiment. It's pretty rough. She's feeling sick, feeling bad. She's like, all right, time to activate deep protocols. So she does, and she's in like extreme agony and pain. She's like freaking out, but the sound of Uni's voice is able to, the power of friendship, obviously. The power of friendship is able to help her pull through, and she's able to overcome the agony, the kind of whatever. And then she's able to manifest these like dark purple chains that allow her to link her senses to any living being. So Mihara resolves to use this forbidden strength to protect the bond that she has with her friends and to capture Gluttony. So Gluttony emerges. We get this very sexy shot of her standing there with her whip, and the battle begins. Uni's able to use her strength, her physical strength, like being half rapture and stuff, to so Mihara like grabs onto the thing, drags it to the shore. Uni holds the jaws open, acting as like a pillar, right? And is preventing them from shutting, right? And then Mihara uses the link she has to intentionally bite her own cheek, and then it inflicts like exceedingly sharp like pain into the rapture, stunning it, right? It does so much fucking damage. And then they're like, all right, we got about 30 minutes before this link fails. Mori, go. So Mori rushes inside. And then she trips and falls, dropping a bunch of shit, right? And then she freaks out because she's like, oh no, this blah, blah, blah. So what am I going to do? And then she remembers when Siren like reached for her, and she's like, no, I have to pay her back. I have to reach for her. And so she abandons everything that she dropped, and she screams and like runs headlong in there. So Gluttony's like freaking out, losing his mind. Mihara's like giving it like all sorts of like the sensory attacks that she does, like when hurting herself hurts someone else instead, and all this stuff, like shooting herself in the leg and it does damage to someone else. Mori finally reunites with Siren. She presents the E2 crystal to her, but Siren initially refuses to leave, believing that she must stay behind to manually disperse the AA pillar's energy. And then they really get into it, right? And then Mori calls her out for trying to be like a martyr and having a martyr complex. And she confesses how she feels useless as an incubator, but she declares that the world without Siren is not a world to live in, and that the only person, because she's the only person that celebrated her life or cared about her at all. And she begs Siren to be her goddess of victory and prove that kindness is rewarded. And so that finally kind of cracks Siren, and she's able to, her unbreakable faith, right? Get it? And then Siren takes her hand, and they resolve to rewrite their story together. So then outside, the physical toil is starting to become like too much for Uni. Her arms are cracking under the pressure of Gluttony, its massive jaw, but she still refuses to move. She views this whole thing as this burden of her, like her dying, her whatever. It's like it's like the first step on her path to atonement. And then Mihara supports her, promising that they're finally going to find redemption together for everything that occurred. And just right about as their limit is reached, Siren and Mori executed. They're able to like blast the fuck out of there. And then right before Gluttony like closes its mouth, Mori fires a bubble gun that Siren created that has all the E2 crystals in it directly into the core. And then Siren uses her Kododoma to fly the entire bubble, guarded out of the throat like a jet. So they emerge on the surface just as like Uni and Mihara are like losing their power to do it, and the E crystals bash into the Rapture's core, into Gluttony's core, and it shatters, taking over the whole thing and absorbing all the energy, right? So this is where the battle like reaches this like climax, because the crystals have weakened the core, but Gluttony attempts to purge the infection with digestive fluid before it can like take over completely. And then Siren uses that moment to use the AA pillar she had protected this whole time as like bait. She flings the energy, all the energy she gathered up from the AA pillar, into Gluttony's mouth, its maw, and Gluttony swallows it, right? But all that energy from the A pillar supercharges the E2 crystals, making them way more powerful than like the digestive juices, and that completely shatters the core. And it's revealed that at this point that Gluttony is not, like, this is not Gluttony. This is like a mouth of Gluttony. And so the actual Rapture is like this huge underground creature, the subterranean main body, which has all these like limbs that are like giant mouths that come out of the ground. So this thing is like fucking ridiculously huge. And so now that they've destroyed this limb, it like detached itself from it and like pieced the fuck out, right? And then everyone's hugging and super happy and whatnot, and Siren's like looking at the sun, and she's like, oh my gosh, I haven't been on the ground, I've been in like this bubble for 7 years. And she's so happy, and she's weeping, and she's so happy that they finally brought her back to the surface. And then we get this movie.
Our voices soar together, carving stems, hand in hand, chasing light forevermore. 暖かいわ。シンデレラ、会いたかったわ。セイレン。これは涙。セイレン、エイブよ。エイブ。生きててよかったっしょ。
Fucking awesome. Okay, so then we go to the epilogue. The epilogue, everyone's back in the bubble garden, which is now just like floating in the water, right? And it's still, she was able to like draw the whole thing out. And then Cinderella's like, wow, this is so beautiful. I love this. It's amazing. And let's see. So then they spend some time just reconnecting with Siren and hanging out and everybody. So we got Grave and Cinderella and Siren and Mori and Mihara and Uni. But then at some point, Uni and like Wardress are like, hey, we got to go back to the Ark. And then, there's a whole thing with Mori's like, okay, I got to go, guys. And Siren's like, where are you going? And she's like, back to the Ark. And Siren's like, why? And Mori's like, because that's where I belong. And Siren's like, you said you were going to come with me and we're going to rewrite our story together. And she's like, well, I can't interrupt you and your friends. And then Cinderella's like, I'm fine if you come. And Abe's like, if Cinderella's okay with it, I'm okay with it. Dumb bitch. And then so Siren's like, yeah, why aren't you coming with us? And Mihara's like, yeah, why would you go back to the Ark? And she's like, I can come. I'm so happy. So she goes with Otels. And then Mihara like reaches out her hand and is like, wait 1 second, Mori. And then Mori runs up and like, shakes her hand. Is like, thank you so much, Mihara. And Mihara's like, oh yeah, I guess a handshake is good, but I wanted your phone so that the Ark can't track you anymore. And she's like, oh, right. And so she hands it over. And Mihara's like, don't worry, we'll take care of it for you. And so let's see. So they say goodbye. She deserts the Ark. Wardress is like, all right, we'll see you later. We're going to go report back to Jin and, say that your life was, you like took off and it's gone forever. Let's see. They firmly reject. Okay. So everyone's like super happy. It's like, so now, Mori is officially part of old Tales, and Cinderella and Abe or Grave are all a big part of it. And they're all super excited and stuff. And let's see. Okay. Then like the final thing is that Cinderella's like, oh, I'm so excited to take you back to meet the prince and all this stuff, which is us. Right. But it'd be great if we could find Hansel and Gretel first. And then Siren gets like very quiet and she's like, oh, is something wrong? Do you know where Hansel and Gretel are? And then and so then Siren's like, yes, I do know, but it might not be a good idea to go talk to them. And Cinderella's like, why? And then Siren's like, because they're no longer allies of humanity. Dun, dun, dun. What does that mean? Well, it is now April 2026, and we still have no fucking clue what that means. So it's been like a year because the anniversary is coming up here this month. So we'll find out more probably about some other things that we're going to talk about in the future, but go ahead and, we have one more Bond story. So let's hop over to that. But that's the end of Unbreakable Sphere. Fucking fantastic. Just as good as Old Tales. All these anniversaries are fucking awesome. Lost Kingdom, all of them. All right. So finally we're going to get to Mihara's, what is it called? Mihara. Oh, I think I have it up here. Bonding Chain. Mihara Bonding Chain's Bond story. This Bond story takes place kind of like in the middle of Unbreakable Sphere. So it still doesn't involve none of these, or I guess like Mori's story involves us as the main character, but these other two really don't. And so back in Reclamation Site 1, Mihara is about to enter a laboratory to undergo further testing and procedures related to the hybridized body before she goes out to use it, I think. I think it takes place like during that period. She's very nervous. She looks at a small flat stone in her pocket, which is a charm with a face carved into it. And this triggers a flashback to the bubble garden inside. Oh, no. So that takes place like after, but then we go back to like when they were in the bubble garden inside Gluttony, where Mihara is grappling with her own powerlessness and her nagging fragmented memory of a man she once promised to help her, which is us. So while she's in there, so this is now the flashback to this time period. So Siren notices Mihara's like spiraling anxiety. She explains that the 70 years of isolation, she learned a trick that when she felt overwhelmed from being too underpowered and too small and stuff, that you must place your faith in others. Siren offers to use her bubbles to manifest the faces of people Mihara trusts, creating a therapeutic circle of familiar visages to ground her mind. So she meets Uni, her partner and other half, Siren and Mori, like her new friends, right? Mana, who's like a stern but caring scientist, Sayun, her creator, and despite Sayun being an asshole and a cunt, Mihara acknowledges a kindness beneath the venom that drove Wardress's creation, and then meets past Uni, right? The most touchingly, Mihara describes Uni as she appeared before her experiments, a gentle, innocent child, seeing seeing this lost version of her partner makes her cry, right? And she asks Siren to disperse the bubble, so Uni never has to see what was taken from her. Mihara then tries to describe one last person, but her memory wipe has left the image blurry and colorless, right? So she can't remember us because she's never really met us. Desperate to know who we are, she convinces Siren to use Kotodoma to force the resurface of the suppressed memories. The process is very antagonizing, but through the pain, Mihara sees flashes of her commander, which is us. She sees the resolution we had, regardless of cost, an apology in a desolate lot, and a conversation about how pain is blessing that proves that she is still alive, right? So remembering this face, with the memories clarified, Siren crafts a final bubble, a handsome, kind-eyed man. Siren diffuses into Kotodoma on Mihara's brain again due to the risk. She offers a different gift. She carves the commander's likeness into a flat stone, and that's the stone Mihara was carrying when she's getting like more experiments on her, so she can always have us with her, carry this presence wherever she goes. We then jump back to the present, and Mihara realizes that her longing for us is what gave her the strength to choose this difficult process of becoming half rapture, half Nikke, becoming like a fucking heretic, essentially. But like a good heretic, I guess. So she kisses the stone, tucks it away, and walks into the lab to face her future at Reclamation Site number 1. And that wraps up this whole bit. So go ahead, like, share, subscribe, comment, and I will catch you guys later. Bye.